This video is going to go through all of the information about genetics that you need to put on your pink card. So Mendelian genetics was just the simple genetics that we started off by talking about with Mendel and his pea plants, and he was the person who realized that there are dominant alleles and there are recessive alleles. And dominant alleles are expressed as uppercase letters, and recessive alleles are expressed as lowercase letters. And please remember that the recessive alleles will always be hidden by a dominant allele if the dominant allele is there. Homozygous dominant individuals will have two uppercase letters, two dominant alleles. Heterozygous individuals will have two different alleles, so big T, little t, for example. And homozygous recessive individuals are the ones who will display the recessive phenotype. They are little t, for example. Phenotype is the trait that you will actually see with your eyes. So for example, tall, red, 4 petals, whatever trait you see with your eyes, that's phenotype. Genotype is just the alleles that they have. We did a bunch of different Punnett squares, and these are just used to predict the different genotypes and phenotypes that you could see in the offspring. So for this example, we are looking at color and size. So gray is dominant to black, big is dominant to small, and it's asking how many offspring in this Punnett square would be expected to be gray and small. Okay, so it looks like our answer here is 4 out of 16. And if we look in this Punnett square there in that second row, these individuals here are heterozygous for color, which would make them the dominant color gray, and then homozygous recessive for size, little b, which would make them small. Incomplete dominance versus codominance is something that you definitely need to remember. So codominance is when a heterozygous individual will show both alleles. So if the heterozygous individual has an allele for red and an allele for blue, it shows both of them and it makes a pattern. Incomplete dominance is more of a blending of the alleles. So if you have a red allele and a white allele, then you would become that pink color. They blend together. Sex-linked traits are traits that are controlled by genes found on the sex chromosome, so the X and Y chromosome. Females are XX, males are XY. This practice problem says a man who has an X-linked recessive disease called hemophilia plans to have children with a normal female. What is the chance they will have a child with hemophilia? So the man, he does have hemophilia, so it's a recessive disorder, so he has to be X little hy. And the female is normal. She is not a carrier, so she is X big H, X big H. She has both completely normal alleles there. And so what is the chance they will have a child with hemophilia? It looks like 100% of the girls will be carriers, but they'll be normal. They won't have hemophilia. And 0% of the boys will have hemophilia. They will all be normal because they can get that normal allele from their mother, and the Y, which doesn't carry the gene, they will get that from their father. A test cross is something that you can do if you have an organism that has the dominant trait, the dominant phenotype, but you're not sure if they're heterozygous or homozygous dominant. So if you have a purple flower, for example, which is dominant, and you don't know if it carries the recessive allele, you can cross it with the recessive color flower and analyze the offspring. If every single one of the offspring have the dominant color, there is a very high chance that your individual flower is homozygous dominant. But if any of the flowers come up as being white, then you know that your flower has to be heterozygous. It has to have that recessive allele to pass down to the next generation. Linked genes are more likely to be inherited together because they are linked on the same chromosome. So this is just traits that typically come together in pairs. They're probably pretty close together on a chromosome. Multiple alleles, such as blood type, it's a trait that is coded for by 3 or more alleles. So blood type is a good example of this. I would be familiar with this example in case you have a question about this on the test. Pedigrees You will almost definitely see a picture of a pedigree that you'll have to answer a question about, so please be familiar with this. Remember that females are circles, males are squares. If they are shaded in, it means they have that trait you are studying. The big giveaway, if it is a recessive trait, is that it skips generations. And if it's going to be X-linked recessive, that means boys are going to be more likely to have it. And so more squares will be shaded in. Okay, so if you need some practice with pedigrees, go back on Schoology and look through some of those questions in the genetics folder. All right, this concludes everything that you need on your pink note cards.